Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to KOR Live's Bigfoot Geography, where we like to discuss the phenomenon known as Bigfoot wherever he may be. I'm your host, Chaster Layenwin, and coming along with me tonight is my wonderful co-host, Kazari Iwakor. How are you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing all right. I'm finally feeling rested after like a solid week and a half of not getting to. Um,
It was a long trip.
well, it has nothing to do with the trip. I was feeling pretty rested after that. It was more something happened at work, and then the weekend I was supposed to be like enjoying and kind of unwinding. A tree fell in my neighborhood and took out a bunch of power lines with a power pole and knocked out power to my house for a good 10 hours. And then my internet didn't come up until probably about midday the next day. So I had to go throw out a bunch of stuff from the fridge and all sorts of other stuff. And so as a result, I didn't really get to rest that weekend. So
Right.
I was pretty stressed out at work for the rest of the week. And I'm only, after last weekend, I'm finally feeling like okay again. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a time over here.
Well, thankfully, we're on the up and up now. Now,
Yeah, we are.
so why are we here tonight? We got a little bit different kind of thing we got going on.
Yeah, I came up with the idea of doing a list of 5 Bigfoot misconceptions. This is kind of one of the ideas we walked away from the Bigfoot Festival with. We've got a couple of other ones that we've got in our back pocket.
Albeit much bigger projects.
Yeah, some that are going to take a bit of time. There's one that we talked to a certain individual, and he kind of basically handed us an idea on a silver platter. That's not the phrase we've been using to refer to it around the office.
Right. We'll definitely get there when we get there, but yeah, it's a lot, and we definitely want to do all of our investigation first before coming to you guys about it. However, it's big news, as we like to say.
It's super big news. Also, we're getting a bit more intimate with our own equipment. Because one thing that we did discuss a lot while we were there is that audio analysis seems to be the big new frontier for Bigfoot research.
And we want to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've already got something in the works. I've been teaching myself quite a bit of audio engineering about that kind of spectrogram analysis with Bigfoot audio and trying to get my head wrapped around what all the other big contemporaries in the field are doing, and also trying to get myself familiarized with the field of bioacoustics in general, which it's a lot. Now, with that though, let's go ahead and get into tonight's stuff. We said we got 5 Bigfoot myths/misconceptions, and what that means for the topic of Bigfoot. Now, you're going to start seeing a bit of a trend here, and we'll get to it at the end. But with that, let's go ahead and knock out the first one, Kaz. So,
All right, so yeah, just to kind of basically, these are 5 things you see in conversation about Bigfoot, where everybody just like is kind of, let's say, assumed that these are things related to Bigfoot, or that these work a certain way, but we don't really have any definite proof that that's the case. And we wanted to talk about this. Once again, this is heavily influenced by what we saw, what we listened to, and what we discussed while we were up at the Kentucky Bigfoot Festival up in Stanton, Kentucky, which is where we recorded our interview that just aired about 2 weeks ago, I want to say.
yes.
And which I'm very thrilled with. I didn't realize you were going to post the video as well. I thought you were just going to grab the audio and run with it, but you know what? That works.
No, it was nice. It took me quite a bit in order to get there.
Yeah.
Like, it was
God, tell me about
3-hour
it.
ordeal.
I went through I think I had like 4 or 5 different methods of trying to get that video off of my phone. Because Apple, really quickly, I just want to extend a giant hearty middle finger to Apple.
We won't go into it, but don't. It's not user friendly.
Screw you and your walled garden philosophy when it comes to your your device design.
Do better.
Do better. Anyways, so here we are. Misconception number 1: Jaster, take us away.
All right. We got tree structures, baby. So what are we talking about here? We got this big sub conversation in the Bigfoot world where Bigfoot likes to build things with logs, with trees. I've heard reports of like tied knots and things like that. All kinds of wild things. But the big consistent one is these TP structures that you see. I'll put them on screen here. You'll see other things like weird kind of crosses or X's. You'll see broken trees, like all kinds of stuff that pretty consistently people like to attribute to Bigfoot and other kind of things. Now, we want to laser in a little bit more on the TPs and the other kind of things like tree breaks we think are something a little bit different than this category. However, tree structures themselves don't really have a whole lot of correlation with Bigfoot outside of them apparently happening in the same area as Bigfoot reports. Because honestly, like when you start to investigate it, like there's not a lot of consistent proof or purpose with these tree structures to link them to the phenomenon. Like the biggest question that I have is that if they're like the TPs, right? Throw one on screen here. You notice anything missing? Like a thatch roof or leaves or any sort of...
Yeah, there's nothing to keep the rain out.
That'd be the whole reason of doing it, right? Like you would think anyway, because like that looks like a structure utilized for shelter in specific, right? Like this doesn't look like some sort of symbolic demonstration. Like if you put leaves on this, you would be able to sleep there for the night, right? But we don't see any debris piles around it to even denote that the covering was taken up or down. Like we ain't got nothing about that. I will say though that the only decently argued one would be what you call a kill shoot or a shoot. So what happens, and you'll see this, like this was used in mankind all the way back to the Stone Ages, where trees will be felled, right, into these shoots. So you'll have like probably 6 to 8 trees tall, like I would say like 4 trees tall and maybe 3 to 4 trees long, where there's this big old shoot or a funnel where people will run deer or they'll run moose or whatever kind of prey they're hunting through these chutes. And what'll happen is at the end of the chute, you'll either have traps or you'll have people laying in wait to ambush the prey as they're moving through the chute. Now, this is the only one I would say has some amount of relevance to the conversation, mostly because it has a signified purpose. Like if they're running, if anything is using that chute, it would be most likely for meat consumption. And that has a purpose, especially whenever you're talking about why somebody put something there, right? Everything else though kind of has it's a bit perplexing when you're looking at it, right? Like I've seen one, I think we put it in one of our videos here in the last 2 or 3 episodes, where it kind of looks more like a deer stand than anything else. Now, the tree breaks, like I said, they're a little different because like they don't require a whole lot of effort besides breaking a tree in order to send a message. And that's something that you utilize, like you see in great apes and you see in primates, where they'll utilize broken trees or twigs, or they'll utilize other sorts of signage to dictate territory, all that other kind of stuff. So that actually kind of makes sense. But like sorry?
If I may, I would like to jump in with something that I think also is kind of loosely related to this is the air quotes Bigfoot Highway. Have you ever heard about these?
Yeah, I
where
think,
they will take these kind of younger sapling trees and like bend them over.
and they'll do it in a
Yep.
line.
Yeah.
Like I think I've heard of people thinking that that's a territorial marker. Like this is literally our
hmm
fence, like the equivalent of a fence, and that makes sense. That's kind of why I didn't include tree breaks in this category.
Yeah.
It's because that actually doesn't take a whole lot of time or thought to really figure out, and you can do this without really working your hands and putting a lot of excess time into it. That's the other big thing about, if you're thinking of, oh, is Bigfoot sentient? Is it using tools, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like, a big part of that is that tool use and stuff is supposed to make your time more valuable, more efficient. And I don't know, for me to not have any sort of consistent roofing to the
hmm
TP structures makes it hard for
hmm
me to attribute this to Bigfoot, especially whenever there's plenty of evidence of Bigfoot bedding down like every other ape.
Yes. Yeah. No, I was, because what sticks out to me more when shelters are found is like usually it's like they've kind of just kind of pulled some branches together to get to create like especially like in between like some bushes or something like that, and it'll just give them a small den to lay in and get out of the rain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because that takes way less effort. You literally just rip some branches off and toss them on a bush or two bushes or over a rocky outcropping or whatever, until your head is sufficiently covered. That doesn't take weaving or knot tying or anything like that.
Right.
Because if we're going by the idea that Bigfoot behaves a lot like other great apes despite being a relict hominid, then that's a far more likely behavior.
Exactly. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next one because this one's a pretty good one, I think, Kaz.
Right, yeah. So, one thing we heard while we were at the conference a lot is people talking about disappearing trackways. And this would inevitably get into the woo. There were more than a couple times where Jasper and I turned to each other and made eye contact and were like, are you hearing this?
Right, in the middle
um,
of a bunch of scientists, people are talking about portals and
mhm.
like all kinds of crazy stuff.
uh, So basically, the idea is that people will find Bigfoot trackways and they will follow them and they'll follow them and they'll follow them and then they'll mysteriously stop. And there are a lot of people who use this and point to see Bigfoot uses tree portals. But there is actually a far more mundane explanation that does happen in nature in other animal species. Um, Now, there are a couple of reasons why a trackway may end. It may be because Bigfoot is, the individual that is being tracked has stopped moving off of a surface that it can leave footprints in. So, it's going from like dirt or mud or gravel or whatever to like, tree roots, grass, rocks, streams, whatever. But more importantly, and this is something that we heard from professional tracker Tom Shea, who works with the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization, more likely is the subject doubling back on its own tracks, which is a behavior that deer are known to do, and a lot of other animals in the woods do as well. Because all animals have a vested interest in not being detected, so they're not found by prey animals, or predators, rather. And so, going to a spot, to eat some food, and then doubling back on the steps you've already taken will help cover your presence. I remember I actually chuckled to myself when Cliff Barackman compared it to the Sand People from Star Wars, because
Right.
because in A New Hope. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan says that the Sand People they walk single file to cover to hide their numbers, and
Which, that one Yosemite pic with the buffalo, that video, you can see them moving in a line.
yes, oh my gosh, one of our favorite videos ever. If you haven't seen it, Thinker Thunker, who is a channel that we like to watch a lot. He does pretty good video and audio analysis, more so audio analysis nowadays, because sadly, photos and videos are kind of going the way of, are kind of going away in terms of being seen as a legitimate form of evidence, because they're becoming increasingly easy to fake thanks to deepfake generators, generator of algorithms, stuff like that. And
Yep.
it's unfortunate, but nowadays a video or photo doesn't really have a lot of veracity unless you have, multiple people who can affirm it. If you can have something like tracks or, other audio and such. And it's a shame because obviously, the video for the amateur researcher is one of the easiest ways to get evidence. One of our favorite pastimes is watching big footage, but the problem is, like, we were literally just hanging out the other night, and one of our friends showed us a funny video that he found of a Bigfoot, air quotes, pranking some campers thinking he found some fireworks, and it was actually dynamite, and it ends up killing the campers, and he's like, oh shit. And while I would still say it's very often obviously AI, the fact that this person was able to just generate this, like, minute-long video with nothing but generative AI algorithms kind of shows where we are at the moment.
Right. But the big part about it, though, is that when it comes to this being a supernatural occurrence, it has a much more mundane explanation. And the other big thing with disappearing trackways is that with the seasonal onset of snow, it makes it even more likely that that's what's happening, because whenever you're walking through snow, if you've ever done that before, you would know that if you're trying to go back the way you came, it's always easier to use your own footsteps than to trudge through fresh snow again. And so that also makes sense. I also would like to point out that with even predators or omnivores that are doing predator behavior, it's also really advantageous to utilize your own footprints as well whenever you're doubling back on a position, because then that also bewilders the prey that might come across it, or trying to track you would lead them into an ambush situation. So that way it makes it a little bit more efficient for you as a hunter in order to get more calories. So with that, let's go ahead and knock out the next one. So this one is big in the Bigfoot discussion. We're going to talk about wood knocks, okay? So the big thing about wood knocks, and this was brought up quite a bit with Finding Bigfoot and other reality TV shows, is that they seem to be a very consistent sound, okay? A lot of people describe it as a Louisville slugger hitting an oak tree, a big one. So how in the world is something or somebody getting the same kind of thing to hit the tree with, and hitting the tree at the right speed and the right amount of force, not breaking whatever it's using to hit the tree with the first time, or if it is, getting multiple of these branches or sticks or other trees and taking them and finding the exact right tree to make that same exact sound. That sounds really unlikely. Even if somebody's taking a Louisville Slugger baseball bat out of their pickup truck, one tree knock is going to sound a lot different than another just based on the type of tree. And the big thing that is kind of interesting is that these wood knocks seem consistent in pitch, varying slightly but not wildly, right? So that leaves a whole lot of questions out there. Like, is wood knocks actually a wood knock?
Yeah.
Now, the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization kind of has a different theory than most, and I think that it makes a lot of sense with the consistency of the tone, and that's that it's actually a type of clapping of hands that, when utilized in the correct way or in the right form, will consistently make this wood knock tone. And that sounds a little more likely because that's something that you could teach. Like, go back to elementary school or middle school, whenever somebody figured out if you box your hands the right way and you blow into it, you can make an owl call. Remember that? Or did anybody do that? So that can be taught, and it can be easily replicated. Trying to find a pile of tree branches that all have the right density, consistency, and the right type of wood, and then training everybody to find the right type of wood, the right type of tree, and the right diameter of tree in order to make the same kind of sound, that's a whole lot more steps. So that makes a little bit more sense. And I think that one's a pretty big one out there. The hard part about audio in general right now is that there's not a lot of video that has a good visual and audio at the same time. Like, that's the one thing I've learned that's kind of another holy grail in the video part of Bigfoot, is if we can find a video of a Bigfoot making a sound. Like a sound off or a call or a wood knock or anything, that would be big as well. So let's go ahead and turn up the heat, Kaz. I'll give you a good one. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so this is another thing that we heard bandied about a lot. When we were at the VIP dinner, I think like 3 or 4 different people brought this up and asked this question: is there a government conspiracy to cover up Bigfoot? I think this is kind of a conversation that inevitably comes up in any kind of fringe science field, whether it be UFOs, Bigfoot, Dogman, what have you, because it's really easy to cast the government in the scary, villain role because of the reach and funding that the government has. And while we personally think that the government definitely knows about and probably has some things related to Bigfoot, we don't necessarily believe that it's in the way that a lot of people would cast the government. So rather than it being a Men in Black, you weren't supposed to see this, we're hiding this from everybody, it's a big conspiracy kind of thing. We think in reality it's just very quietly sweeping things under the rug. This is not a gigantic, well-coordinated campaign where they're striking documents and confiscating stuff from park rangers and stuff like that. It's basically saying, hey, if you see this, don't talk about this in a professional regard, and keep it on the down low. And the main reason we believe that, because there are 2 industries that would suffer very greatly if the government acknowledged Bigfoot. The first one is the logging industry. And it's worth saying that loggers encountering Bigfoot is kind of a subgenre of its own.
Definitely.
Just off the top of my head, I can think of that footage from Russia of that Bigfoot flinging a log. You remember that one?
I do remember that one.
I
think the first contemporary Bigfoot, like, the word Bigfoot itself came from a logging team.
Yeah, some of the earliest Bigfoot, print casts came from logging roads. I mean, hell, if I remember correctly, in the area where you grew up, there's this area where there's a logging claim where multiple businesses have come in, set up shop, and then abruptly shut down and left for no real reason. I remember you talked about that during I think it was during our interview with John.
Yeah. I think I brought that up a couple of times. That was the one where it was me and my dog.
Mm-hmm. And so, if word got out that there was a big ape out in the woods, I think it would scare away business. And, the logging industry is very, I wouldn't say if they're a tentpole holding up, the nation's economy, that's extremely far-fetched, but they are a very lucrative industry, and there's a lot of money to be lost there. But the other one, and this is the really big kicker, is it would negatively affect our national parks. Now, it's worth noting that America's national parks are extremely beautiful, and we've gotten up on our soapboxes multiple times about preserving them against, say, I don't know, private interests from certain rich individuals who want to take away all their protections so they can, I don't know, strike oil claims and start logging there. I'm not going to point any fingers or name any names.
Freshwater, Nestle.
But there are certain people out there right now in DC who think that our national parks are there to be exploited.
Now, the big part about that, though, is that it's not as, like you said, it's not like Men in Black alien level cover up here.
No, absolutely not.
Like, this could easily just be the clerks at the office being told how to file it.
Yeah, exactly. I fully believe that there is an entire pool of, like, recorded sightings and stuff that you could probably pull a FOIA on if you wanted to, but you'd have to know, like, the exact term, because they probably have, like, a code to file it under. Now, the main reason, especially in regards to the national parks, is that the national parks, they make, like, 3 or 4 times what it costs to operate them, just by existing. The amount of tourism, the amount of revenue that they generate from tourism, be it hikers, campers, photographers, whatever, of people going out there, it means a lot for our nation. And let's find out that Jane Doe wants to take her family out camping in, I don't know, say Big Thicket National Forest or something like that. I know that's not a national park, but just stick with me here. And then government says, yeah, by the way, there are big scary ape men out there. All of a sudden, Jane Doe isn't interested in taking her children into the woods anymore. And
the other part about that's important, though, is that the kind of people that would attract inevitably are not the kind of people that I don't think the government wants on public land, running around shooting at things. Like, that's a whole other level of problem. Like, we already regulate that enough with hunting, you know what I mean? Like, it would be wild, because, like, the type I'm talking about, the beer drinking crazy Sam Squatch hunting type person. Those are going to be the people running out there and causing accidents. You see it all the time. It just seems like that's a more reasonable explanation. But we'll make a more concentrated video on this one in the future. So let's go ahead and round this one out.
Yeah.
Okay. This one's a big one. Like,
this is a really big one.
We ended up talking about orbs quite a lot as well.
Yes. Yeah, this is another one that came out quite a bit.
And what I want to introduce everybody to, if you haven't heard about it before, is a phenomenon known as earthquake lights. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up real quick for myself. But the first records of these earthquake lights, and this I pulled this up from Wikipedia. Okay, so don't just, if this is wrong, okay, just don't shoot the messenger. Was actually in Japan in 869 AD. Okay, and were described as strange lights in the sky during an earthquake. Now, what's important to note is that there's no broad consensus as to the causes of earthquake lights. It just so happens that around certain kind of rock deposits like limestone or tectonic activity or volcanic activity, these lights seem to just pop off in the sky. Now, there are a bunch of recorded modern time sightings, including photos, from 2003 in Colima, 2007 in Peru, 2010 in Chile, the North Canterbury earthquake in New Zealand. We got Wellington 2016. And the big thing about this, okay, is that these lights pop off and you think, okay, this only happens around the earthquake site or around the volcanic site. Not necessarily, okay? In 2017, there was an 8.2 magnitude level earthquake in Mexico City, right? Earthquake lights were spotted 460 miles away.
Yep.
Crazy. It just has to be, I guess, in the right fault line or area around it. And the crazy part about this is that limestone caves seem to also be another focal point for these things. And a lot of people talk about orbs specifically around the Appalachian region, which also has a lot of tectonic activity and pressure. Now, the big thing about that is that there is a fault in the Ohio Valley area, right? Around the
Yes.
Appalachians.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No. Actually, really quickly, editing Jester. This is for you. Throw back up our map of, uh, you know, cave formations in the United States, because that actually plays into this again. What a handy dandy graphic that is.
mm-hmm.
We can actually see the fault in the Ohio Valley area with all the sinkholes that are formed, and we can see all these stretches of limestone caverns and deposits all across the majority of the eastern United States, and bits and pieces of the western United States as well.
It is rather interesting, a
Yes.
phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean Bigfoot, right? This is one of
Yes.
those correlation causation fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
What is important to note is that these things seem to happen around places where there are limestone caves, deposits, at least around where I live, and that's where a lot of this conversation gets started all the time. Is
Mm-hmm.
like Appalachia has a lot of folklore surrounding it. A lot of spoopy stuff starts to bleed in to anything that happens around here. Okay? Like, there are plenty of channels you can go where you can talk about all kinds of weird, strange things that happen along this mountain range. Okay? However, that doesn't mean that they're all connected.
It's also worth noting that other things that can cause orbs in, photographs and video is dust, pollen, and insects. To an unfocused lens, if light shines on these objects in just the right way, it'll suddenly come off as an orb. You can see this plenty. I think one of the best examples is get your average like nighttime footage of somebody like standing out in a graveyard, and especially in the south, and there will just be insects flying all over, and
Lightning bugs.
mhm, and they will come off looking like just orbs floating around all these people. Um,
You really gotta watch it. Like, it's something that you can only really see in either video or seeing it yourself. Like, when those orbs, like, if they blink out after half a second and they only go a couple of centimeters, that's probably a lightning bug. And pollen is wicked, especially if it happens at night and you've got any sort of light from aircraft or satellites or towers of any sort projecting light over a long distance. Like, refracting light does a wild amount of things. So there's plenty of things that can cause the orb phenomenon. But what we really wanted to drive home is that there is no link between it and Bigfoot. Just so happens that the two things seem to happen in the same areas. There's probably a bigger correlation between Bigfoot and caves than there are Bigfoot and orbs. And if you want to watch that video, we got a link to it over here. We'll just flang it up over there. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So, with that,
One thing
guys,
also I would like to bring up in relation to orbs, as rare as it is, you basically have to win the lottery for the conditions for it to be right. Ball lightning is a thing too. I don't. I think this only accounts for a very, very small fraction of floating orb sightings, because like ball lightning is a known phenomenon that has been figured out, and the like you have a better chance of actually winning the lottery than you do seeing ball lightning. Um,
right.
but that's a thing out there that could happen as well. And it's very possible that someone could see it and not know it's ball lightning and be like, "Oh, that's an orb. That's a ghost light." So it's just what we're trying to say here is that first off, orbs may appear in an area, and there may be any number of reasons for them existing, but this doesn't necessarily mean they're tied to Bigfoot. Bigfoot and orbs can appear in the same area, but you need to remember a very key phrase: correlation is not causation.
Like, whenever people really start doing data analyst stuff or critical thinking or trying to look at it through a more scientific lens, like, you really got to keep that in mind and making sure you're not confirming your own biases. Like,
Yeah, confirmation bias is something that you really have to be careful about, especially in fields like this. Just because, like, this is it's very easy to jump into your own beliefs and thoughts when it comes to researching Bigfoot, because again, some of the stuff we brought up, the tree portals, the government conspiracies, stuff like that. These are all things that people jump to because it fits within their purview and they believe it as an explanation. And we're not saying that believing in these things is bad, but when you are investigating things, you have to look at it from an objective standpoint and be like, is there anything that points to this conclusion?
right. And that can be harder to actually establish objectively than one might think. So trying to do it through more than one avenue is always a better route than just trying to do it through one thing. Always trying to find a secondary way or a tertiary way that something might line up. Three's a pattern.
Yeah.
So that always helps.
Absolutely.
So
is there anything else to really be said on this? Any closing thoughts? Anything like that?
I just think that there are two real big camps out there when you really look at it, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of other sub-factions of the Bigfoot community, but there's two of them, right? There's the scientific crowd and the woo crowd.
Yeah.
And it is so hard to try to get people to understand that this is something that people want to actually take seriously whenever a large part of the community is also running around looking people dead in the face and said, I got one living with me. It eats out of my trash can.
And it farted in my living room.
Oh man, that's a rough one. So we'll keep that on the DL. However, it's hard for people to actually take it seriously whenever so many people are attributing things supernaturally to the topic, whenever there is mundane explanations. And hopefully we were able to give some of those out to you guys, and hopefully you took something away from this video. Now, I think that's everything we got for tonight.
Pretty much, yeah. We hit all of our talking points we wanted to.
Alright guys, so we thank y'all for coming by. If you liked the video, like, comment, subscribe, that helps us quite a bit. And we'll see y'all next time on the next episode of Bigfoot Geography. Y'all have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.